Well, on today's Locked On Anaheim Ducks, I'll be joined by JD Young from Locked On Sharks in a getting to know you special episode as we delve into how the Sharks are looking this offseason and how they compare to the Anaheim Ducks. We'll talk about some of their biggest moves. We'll talk about some other stuff as I present JD and JD on today's episode of Locked On Anaheim Ducks. Let's hit it.
Your Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
It's hot, it's humid, and just like the weather, the off-season talk is hot. Hi everyone, I'm JD Hernandez, host of Locked On Ducks, part of TLOPN, and don't forget this podcast is free and available across all platforms. And thanks for making this your first listen, and thanks for making Locked On Sharks your second listen, because I have here the other JD, JD North, or as I call him, other JD, or as I sometimes say jokingly, the not so handsome JD, but I'm only kidding about that. It is JD Young from the hairier JD. Can we
Yes.
can we say that? What adjective can I use? JD Young from Locked On Sharks. JD, what adjective do you want to go with today?
The handsome one, of course.
Oh God, you can't say that here. It's my pod. Try again. Do we
JD North is pretty funny, but yeah.
JD
fine.
North?
Yep.
Well, the Sharks have had an interesting offseason, and it's getting to know the enemies. And although I don't think of the Sharks as like a huge enemy, I think the Kings are the biggest rivals and Golden Knights are the enemy. But, Sharks are considered an enemy. An enemy. So let's talk about the Sharks a little bit. Talk about their off season, because they've had a pretty interesting off season. As you said, they put a whole off season into 3 weeks.
They did.
It was fast. It was furious. Let's talk about that off season. What was the biggest move for the
All
Sharks?
of them. So let's start at the beginning. So, of course, Doug Wilson, who was the general manager for 19 years, he stepped away during the end of last season due to health reasons. Wasn't there the entire season. Then he officially stepped down in April last year. So that gave the Sharks looking for a new GM for the first time in 20 years, right? That's a very long time to be, searching for with having the same GM. So they very long, extensive search where July 5th, they finally hired Mike Greer, whose brother Chris Greer runs the Dolphins, which I think is pretty cool. But before that, they also had Bob Bugner, who was the head coach. They retained him until July 1st, right before they hired Mike Greer. So they let him go and his staff go really, really late into the offseason. So Mike Greer was hired, then the draft, then free agency, and then they hired David Quinn, who was the Rangers head coach a couple years ago. Who they Mike Greer and David Quinn are old buddies from college. So yes, it was a very massive offseason for the Sharks, where moving on from a lot of core front office people, and this isn't even not even only the Sharks, even the Barracuda, they kind of cleaned house in the Barracuda. They all new coaches, like everything in the CUDA. It's been a massive transitional offseason for the Sharks organization this year.
Yeah, speaking of the Barracuda, I was a little bit surprised. I don't know if you were, that Roy Summer stepped down from his position in San Jose, and now he's the San Diego Gulls head coach. I think it was a little weird, don't you think?
Yeah, he did not see it coming. I'm gonna from people I've talked to, he was planning on being back, especially for the CUDA, where they're opening up their brand new arena. He's a couple wins away from I think 700 or something like that, like a huge milestone. And a lot of people, are expecting him to be back, especially because he's been with the Sharks organization for so long. But they hired John McCarthy, who I talked to earlier this summer. Go check out that interview. Very nice interview of mine. I'm going to plug. But They hired him, who'd been their developmental coach. They hired a bunch of new coaches from the WHL to come in and be his new assistant coaches, and really trying to kind of reinvigorate this Sharks development, especially now that they're starting to see some of the fruits of their drafts, for the 2020 draft, which is probably going to be their best draft class that they've had in a while, starting to kind of infiltrate the organization now. So.
Yeah, I see Roy Summer making a difference for the goals. And I know that they play in San Jose fairly early in the season.
I think it's like November, if I remember correctly. It's really, it's pretty early.
Yeah, it's actually, no, I take it back. October 26th.
Oh, there you go. Yes.
So it is early in the season. And I was trying to find the wins total for Roy Summer. And it's a little harder to find right now. I'll admit that. But he could be having that milestone victory. I'll just put it out there. Wouldn't it be neat if he got that victory in San Jose?
It would make sense just with how everything's gone. So,
yeah, just for the sake of argument. And by the way, I actually did find it. He's the all-time leader in wins. Actually, he passed it. He's at 808 right now.
Man.
So he just passed 800 victories. Woo, boy, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Let's keep going with this offseason and talk about grading the offseason. You talked about new coaching staffs up and down. How would you grade this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, even if you look at what the Sharks did, not just with their front office, but the actual moves they made. So they traded Brent Burns, who had been a stalwart for the Sharks for a very long time. You could argue he's their best defenseman ever. He's up there. You could definitely argue if you combine his longevity and, he actually won a Norris with the Sharks. Been a staple with the Sharks organization, right? They traded him to Carolina for a third-round pick and, Steven Lorentz and then a goalie prospect. And, Mike Greer's plan this year was to try to get some more kind of NHL caliber players to kind of fill out their bottom line. They've had a lot of times where they've been asking, younger guys or AHL guys to fill out these roles because they've had so much of their cap space kind of tied up in big contracts. Erik Karlsson's, Brent Burns, Mark-Edouard Vlasic, all these guys who make a ton of money, right?
Too much money. Too much.
Yes, too much money. But so trying to fill out the fringe roster spots with some of these guys who maybe not quite ready for these roles type of situations. So Mike Greer, he traded away Brent Burns and he used that money to try to kind of solidify that bottom six there with more just kind of NHL caliber players. So, he signed Oscar Lindbaum, who looked like he was going to be a pretty capable player until his cancer diagnosis. He's come back and he's talked about before where he just hasn't quite gotten his strength yet. So they traded for Luke Kunin at the draft from the Preds, who I wasn't a big fan of that move. And they signed some kind of depth guys like Matt Benning on defense and, just some of these guys, Nico Sturm on forward. Some of these guys are just played NHL games and know what they're doing out there. So,
yeah.
But overall, I would give the offseason a C.
That's fair.
Yes.
Given the expectations of the Sharks, that's probably where I had that as well, is being a C. You see, JD?
I do see JD.
We'll have more with JD Young after this brief word from Bet Online, which is the one place that has you covered and the one place that we trust. And folks, the NBA season is right around the corner and the NHL season starts in about a month. So if we want to check out all the future bets, including who's going to win the Hart Trophy and who's going to possibly win the Cup and what are the points projections for all the teams in the National Hockey League, you could find out at Bet Online using either your mobile device or your laptop or wherever you can get Bet Online. So once again, Bet Online is the official online sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network, and please gamble responsibly. Let's talk about big questions. Let's do that.
Okay.
JD, what's the biggest question heading into training camp, JD?
My biggest question is how are all these pieces going to kind of fit together? So they actually have too many NHL contracts right now, at least when it comes to the forwards. They have, I think it's like, let me pull it up right now, 14 forwards who are under an NHL contract. And that doesn't
Uh,
include Thomas Bordeleau right now. And only Thomas Bordeleau and William Eklund. Um, so,
jeez.
yes.
I'm
Uh,
sorry.
yes. So they have a lot of guys, but I don't think they have a lot of guys who are kind of difference makers outside of Tomas Hertl and Timo Meyer when it comes to the forwards. They just have a lot of guys. And so I think the biggest question is going to be how does this shake out? Because I think William Eklund's going to make the team out of camp. He made the team last year. Bordeleau played really well in his 8 games last year. Had a pretty nice summer at World Juniors, playing for Team USA,
Yeah.
and I think I just think with the numbers game where he's probably going to start with Akuda at some point. But they just, like I said, you have like a Nick Bonino and Nico Sturm and Steven Lorentz and Noah Gregor and Matt Nieto, like all these guys, and Luke Kunin, like all these guys are just like kind of guys, and none of them. It just feels like it's a big log jam at the forward department right now.
It really is. And I look at the Sharks roster right now, the way it's constructed. I don't see a world where they're going to score a ton of goals. I mean, they just don't have
They didn't
this.
score goals last year. They're not going to do it again this year.
Yeah, they don't have the speed. I mean, yeah, they could be. They could be. Can I say it? They could be what the Ducks were recently, where they just don't score a lot of goals and could have an abysmal power. Well, the power play wasn't bad for Sharks last season. It
It was kind
was.
of mediocre. So the
It,
penalty kill was very good. They were second in
the
the league in
penalty.
penalty kill.
Yeah,
But yeah, the power play is very stale and stagnant, and it's always been this kind of dueling banjos thing with Burns and Carlson the
yeah.
past
You know
couple
what?
years.
I mean, the power play needs fiber,
Yeah, it
if you know
needs.
what I mean.
Yes, it needs to. So I think that'll be clear itself up. With Eric Carlson kind of being the guy now with Brent Burns out of town, and then I think the other kind
Yeah.
of big question is Ryan Merkley for the Sharks. Is
Ooh.
you see flashes of it of like, oh wow, this guy can be special, and then on the same shift you're like, dude, what are you doing? Type of situation. So can he be an everyday NHL player this year and kind of help solidify that right side where after Carlson, it's kind of a bunch of like you have Matt Benning, who's a perfectly cromulent third line defenseman. And then there's really not much
Oh
else on
yeah.
the right side. So I think those are kind of my big questions going into the training camp of who's going to win that second or right hand defenseman spot, and then how are all the forwards just going to shake out?
That's a fair question. And talking about a couple of the guys that you mentioned, former former Barracuda players, I know what I'm saying. And the one that always intrigued me, and you kind of brought it up, um, you know, who was it that Magna looks interesting as well, but another name, Bordeleau could be interesting. I like him a lot.
Borla is very good. Like he's really good. I think he's going to eventually be their 2C at some point. But like I said, I think the Sharks definitely are more of one of those teams where they like to kind of slow cook their rookies or their younger players.
Yeah.
Mike Greer has talked about where he wants these guys to be when they make the NHL like that they're NHL ready and wants to really kind of use the Barracuda as a developmental league.
Yeah,
And
he's still
so
young. He's still
yeah,
young.
yeah, he's still young. So, but he looked really great last year in the 8 games that he got to play at the end of the season. I think he had 5 assists during that time. Really kind of brought energy to a third line of Rudolph Balcers, Rudolph Balcers, Noah Gregor, and Bordeleau. So yeah,
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, hey, he perfectly embiggened his role in San with the Barracuda. That is.
so
Yeah, he kind of yeah, he feels like he could be that guy.
He's good.
Yeah, he is. I mean, watching him the one game that I saw up close, yeah, he's something else. How about speaking of strong players? Let's talk about the strengths for the Sharks and the weaknesses. What's the biggest strength and the biggest weakness?
So I think the biggest strength, I think their penalty kill is still going to be their biggest strength. I know that it's a whole new coaching staff, but they hired Ryan Warsofsky, who was the Chicago Wolves head coach, who's going to come in and run the defense and run the penalty kill as well.
Yeah, and a former colleague is pissed about it.
Yes, the Sharks just love rating the Wolves head coaches, but I think he's going to come in and continue to have a very aggressive penalty kill. You have Logan Couture, who's a great penalty killer. You've got Hurdle, who's a great penalty killer. Nick Bonino, a great penalty killer. Luke Kunin can play the penalty kill. Like, you have a lot of guys who can play the penalty kill. Mario Ferraro is going to be kind of the leader on the defense when it comes to that. It's going to be weird not seeing Brent Burns back there, but I still think
Yeah.
their system of being hyper aggressive on the penalty kill and having that power kill mentality is going to be their big strength this year. As for weakness, they're just not going to
Everything else.
Yeah, they're not going to be able to score goals. If Tomas Hertl and Timo Meyer aren't scoring, then I don't see it.
Then good luck.
Yeah, I could see Couture maybe having a little bit of a bounce back this year. He got stuck with some awful line mates, or they just couldn't find. They just have enough guys to make a quality second line for him. So we'll see. I think William Eklund's probably going to be starting on the second line with Couture, and then it'll probably be your kind of wing de jour on the third. But the third on the there, whoever kind of David Quinn likes that night. But the third and fourth lines are just going to be a bunch of NHL guys who do NHL things, but I don't see much upside from the third line.
They're just guys.
They're just a bunch of guys, and that's my thing. It's like a lot of people were kind of upset with, like, maybe not, like, they got rid of Rudolph Balcers. They didn't keep Jonathan Dahlin, who, those guys, they did have their ups and downs, but at least you saw like an upside with them. And I just feel like the Sharks, they don't have a lot of guys where you can see, like, you can point to a guy and be like, okay, I can see that guy breaking out. I could see this guy being, going from maybe like 7 goals to like 20 goals or like something like that. And there's just not a lot of guys on the team right now of where that could happen.
So instead of talking about best worst case scenario, because I feel like the Sharks are going to be last place.
Oh, the best case scenario is they just totally bottom out and they win the lottery. That is
the
best case scenario. And the worst case scenario is what we've had the last couple of years of, like, we're trying to make the playoffs, and then you're just that creamy middle, like 10 through 15 team.
Gross.
It's the worst. So
gross.
Yes, like, if you get in the playoffs, it's cool. Yes, I know anything can happen, but you're going to play either Edmonton or Colorado in the first round, and you're going to get shellacked by either one of these juggernaut teams. So, and yes, I know it's crazy stuff happens all the time, but is Capo Kakinen going to steal an entire series from maybe? I doubt it.
Thinking of a number between 1 and no on that one.
Yeah, like, could he steal a game or two? Maybe. Cool. You're getting outshot like 50 to 20, and you steal the game, 2-1 because your power play scores and Capo Kakinen goes insane. But it's just not a formula for sustained success. So
yeah,
the best case scenario for the Sharks is that they're one of the 3 to 5 worst teams, and they get some luck on the lottery. So
woohoo! Let's talk about wild card. Who's the biggest wild card for the Sharks this season?
It's got to be William Eklund. He played his 9 games last year, and they sent him back to Sweden, and he didn't have the season that you would want over in Sweden. He got put on the third line. The Djurgården team was an absolute tire fire of a team where they coaching and GM kind of all got cleaned house. They got relegated to the Hockey Allsvenskan League. So, but after I talked to him this summer, you can go check out that interview as well. He is ready to come in and kind of prove why a lot of people thought he was the best player in that 2021 draft, including, better than Mason McTavish potentially. So, yes, a lot of people thought he was the best player in the draft.
What are you talking about? I don't see him stopping a goal, winning a gold medal for his country.
Because he was
Come
in the
on.
weight room, baby, putting on that weight. So, yeah, he was going to play World Juniors. He decided that he wanted to skip World Juniors so that way he could focus on
Let
getting his
McTavish
body.
have the spotlights.
Yeah, he was like, I want McTavish to have a spotlight. No, he wanted to continue to work on getting his body ready for the NHL. He saw what it takes to play, in the NHL, and he's ready to come in and just show why he can be so special and put his name into the hat with the Zegerses, the McTavishes, the Beifelds in the Pacific Division, the Wrights and the Beniers, and put his hat in the Pacific Division of these exciting young players there. So if he comes in and has a potential Calder-worthy season, that's the biggest wild card.
Buddy. Oh, JD. Look, I'm gonna come out and say this right now in September. He could be a contender for the Calder, but I'm Team McTavish winning the Calder all the way. Just saying. Look at the summer McTavish has had. Look at the body of work he's had.
Yeah, he's had a good summer. But you know who's been quietly in the weight room, just working hard?
Are you saying this is like a Rocky IV situation?
Totally.
Where...
he's been in the mountains of Sweden. Yes, I can confirm he's been in the mountains of Sweden. He's been working out. He's been getting his body ready. He is ready to go. So
he could be the Rocky in the situation. I don't want to call McTavish the Russian on this one. I don't want to do that. Let me take that part back. I mean that in the sense that McTavish has been more in the public eye and everyone has been watching all his work and seeing what he's done on several levels. So he's been more public. He's probably the favorite to win the Calder among the favorites.
I think Seattle's got a couple guys up there that have some.
I'm gonna watch what I say here because Eklund has been stealth in his training. Oh God, I loathe myself for that joke. Yeah, thanks, I guess. So we're gonna skip over the play let me jump because I know what that is gonna be. I'm gonna have fun with this question. Who's the most intriguing young player and why is it Thomas Bordeleau?
So Bordeleau is fun, and I think Bordeleau, like I said, I think he's going to start his season in the Barracuda, but I think he's going to be one of those Christmas call-up guys who come up and then he never goes back down type of players. So Bordeleau was drafted in the 2020 draft class. He was a second-round pick for the Sharks, and after playing at Michigan for 2 years, came over. They gave him the old PTO thing where he could play on the Barracuda without eating his contract, and he played a whopping 3 games, and they were like, buddy, you got to come play with the Sharks now. So, like I said, he did not look out of place last year playing with the Sharks. Brought a lot of energy, a lot of creativity on the ice, and I think for him, he definitely still tries to do a little bit too much sometimes, but I'd rather have a guy like that where you try to rein it in instead of trying to pull it out type of situation. And I think for him, finding the right line mates is going to be important, but he's not the biggest guy, but just when he's on the ice, some of the stuff that he does and some of the passes and his vision and his creativity, it's really great to see. And like I said, I think with a guy like Logan Couture, if you have Bordeleau, who is all intents and purposes playing your 2C role, kind of that offensive orient, and then Logan Couture can play your 3C kind of defensive oriented, but still be able to provide offense. I think that's where they would want to try to utilize them, where you're sheltering Bordeleau as best you can, and then having a guy like Couture who's been there and done it and done a bit. He can kind of take those kind of heavier minutes. So.
Yeah, but why do I feel like Bordeleau could just come in like gangbusters, like I said, in December? and become one of those guys that doesn't come out of nowhere, but he can come in and say, you know what, like I can contribute right away. And I liken his playmaking ability to some, like he could be an elite playmaker in this league. You could see it in his body of work in general. So I like him a lot too. That's why I asked in that tone,
Yes,
like,
yes.
why is it Bordelot?
Yeah, no, like I said, I think having someone who can shoot with him is going to be important, and that's the problem. Is
Mm-hmm.
the Sharks don't have a lot of kind of a certified sniper. They have some, like Daniel Gushin is going to be playing on the Barracuda, but even on the Sharks team, like Timo is more of a volume shooter. Kevin LeBanc, who missed most of last year with an injury, like he sometimes can be, but he feels like more of a power play specialist at this point, and we don't know how he's going to be coming back from his injury. But
Maybe
yeah,
Barbanov will surprise us.
yeah, like Barabanov's kind of been like
Barbanov.
the glue guy on the Hurdle Meyer line, and it's just they just don't have a lot of, which goes back to the original point. They just don't have a lot of ways to score goals unless it's Timo Meyer and Tomas Hurdle doing stuff. So yeah, but I mean, like I said last year, Rudolph Balcers and Noah Gregor go Burr, but they just don't have a lot of guys. He made that line fun, but they just don't have a lot of guys who can finish.
Ooh, say it again. Let's finish off asking where you. I mean, this isn't even really a question because I know what the answer is going to be. We know what it's going to be. Where do the Sharks finish in the Pacific, and why is it dead last?
Because of the worst team in the Pacific. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, I know they added some NHL caliber players, but I just feel like the ceiling on this team is so capped right now, where
Yeah.
they just don't have guys who can score on a regular basis, and they don't have breakout caliber players right now. Like they don't have a guy like other than Timo Meyer and Tomas Hurdle. And the big thing we haven't really talked about Timo Meyer. He's going into a contract year this year, and all the hullabaloo that we had dealt with Hurdle last year of is he going to resign? Are they going to trade him? We get to do that all over again this year with Timo Meyer, and
Yep.
he's going to be expecting at least I would probably start at that contract's probably going to start at 8 years, $9 million at some point.
Yeah.
Looking at the Sharks cap space,
They can't afford it.
They can't afford it right at this point. So, but I mean, Timo Meyer is only 25, 26 years old. He's entering his prime right now. Like this is the best Timo Meyer we're going to be getting, and he's probably still going to be good for the next 4 to 5 years. So even if you sign him to an 8-year deal, you're probably still getting at least half of that contract in his prime.
But
so
how do you move those other contracts? I mean, you got those albatross contracts in Vlasic and Carlson.
Yeah, and I think this is Vlasic's last year in San Jose. I think he's going to get bought out next summer. And then, but it's tough, right? Because if Timo Meyer just doesn't want to be here anymore, that's a whole nother question. So
Yeah.
so you're going to have to deal with this Timo Meyer question hanging over the team all season. Can Logan Couture? We've started to see kind of things start to slip a little bit with here and there, and and again, you've got Nick Bonino, who's Luke Kunin, Oscar Lindblom, okay, maybe,
inspiring if nothing else.
Inspiring if nothing else, okay, like it's just going up and down the forward roster. It's Matt Nieto, cool,
Yeah.
There's just not a lot of guys to get super excited about, and yeah, so they're going to be last, and unless Erik Karlsson wins the Norris this year, if William Eklund wins the Calder, and then if Capo Kakinen can just steal games night in and night out, it's going to be a long year for San Jose.
I'm going to go off the board with these last two questions because this is kind of really off the board. So I've been pointing to this jersey. What is your favorite Sharks jersey?
I like the 25th and the 30th anniversary Heritage jerseys. Those are my all time. Those are my favorite. So
the OG inspired ones.
Yes.
Is Stealth at least in the top 3?
It's up there. It's in my top 5. So yeah,
Ah,
I do have that exact same Stealth Carlson jersey. So
oh, the same one I have here.
mhm.
It's a nice jersey. Like, you
Very
gotta
nice
admit,
jersey. Yes.
the details in the sleeves, especially. And this one, I mean, I hate to end on a maudlin note, but maybe like reminiscent. The AHL has changed a little bit in the division. You had your northern rivals now moved to Calgary.
Mhm.
So I don't know if you ever made it out to Stockton, did you?
I did not know.
You did not. That's kind of where I was gonna go. Like, if you've been out there, what are you gonna miss about it? But since you never made it out there, that kind of goes into my last question. The Barracuda have a new shiny arena.
It's very nice.
You got to tour it.
I did.
What can fans expect when they see a Barracuda game at their new digs?
Yeah, I mean they've done a lot with this arena. One of the coolest features is behind. So it'll be behind the away teams where the away team will play twice.
Mhm.
They have a bar literally right behind the goal with like there's
Yes.
like a little kind of tape or like a long kind of bench or whatever with some stools and stuff. But that's it. Like the goal light is literally right there. Like you could be drinking, like put your drink on the goal light type of situation.
Oh, yeah.
Bar, but yeah, the arena is really nice. The not a you know the sightlines are amazing. It's so nice what they did with that place, and for the Sharks not having to share the SAP Center with the Sharks and the Barracuda. One bad thing is they don't have any double headers this year, like where you can go to a CUDA game in the morning, like in the early afternoon, and go see a Sharks game in that night. They didn't do that this year, unfortunately. But Tech CU Arena it's really nice. I'm super excited to go to some Barracuda games this year. So,
I mean, one thing I won't miss having vertigo from going up to the rafters of SAP Center. Do the press at least get better seats this year?
yes, the press. I got to see the tour. Yeah, they're basically like on the second level.
Oh,
So
thank God.
yeah, it's basically like so you have like the bottom bowl, and the second level is like all the suites, and then like the press is on and like in one of the corner. Like they're kind of in the corner above the bar area too. So
Ooh.
yeah, it's really nice, and so yeah, the
So
press box
I
is a
won't.
little small, but I mean it's really nice though.
So I won't have to climb a million stairs to get to the rafters.
No, that the SAP press box is yeah.
We've both been up there. We'll just say it was high up.
It's very high up, and then if you have to go to the other side, you gotta
Nope,
cross
nope,
the
nope,
yeah.
nope, nope, nope. I took pictures. I did it.
Yeah.
It's something. Yeah, we'll reminisce about that. JD, where can the fine folks find your podcast and find your work, et cetera, et cetera?
Of course, you can find Locked On Sharks on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Locked On Sharks. Very active on these socials. Yeah, we're one of the funny accounts, I will say. And then, of course, you can find the show wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Odyssey, all those places. And then YouTube as well, Locked On Sharks. You can find me on Twitter at myfryhole. Yeah.
Yeah, fun
And then I
times,
also
JD.
write at Fear the Fin at San Jose Hockey Now. So yeah,
Fun times. And say hi to my buddy Shang for me next time you see him.
I will. I talk to him all the time. So yes,
Yep. JD, thanks for coming on.
thanks, buddy.
Well, that's going to do it for today's podcast. Once again, special thank you to JD Young from Locked On Sharks for joining on the program. It was a lot of fun. We actually went through a lot of topics on this one, including, where the teams were going to end up in the division. So yeah, that was a fun one. Once again, thanks for this special Labor Day weekend edition of Locked On Ducks. Crossover with Locked On Sharks. It was a ton of fun. If we want to check out Locked On Sharks, he told you where you could find his podcast. As for me, you could find me on Twitter at StimpyJD. And also, the show's Twitter is at LO_Ducks. And hey, don't forget, this podcast is free and available across all platforms, including Stitcher, Spotify, Odyssey, etc., etc. If you want to email me, you can do so at lockedonanaheimducks@gmail.com. Once again, thank you all for your continued support. It is greatly appreciated. For Locked On Anaheim Ducks, I'm Jason JD Hernandez saying have a great Labor Day weekend. Please stay safe from this heat. Please continue to be kind to each other, and Ducks fly together.